Ever get that feeling, like wading through just tons of info out there? You just want something real, something that kind of hits home.
Yeah.
Well, that's what we're doing. Today, we're going to do a deep dive into this perspective.
Yeah.
It flips the script, honestly, on faith and what lasts, what really lasts.
Okay.
We're looking at excerpts in this podcast. It's called What is the Only Thing That Lasts Forever? Understanding God's Eternal Love.
Mm,
And let me tell you, it makes some pretty bold claims
it does.
about, well, what matters most in our relationship with God.
It's interesting, actually, because the source right off the bat throws down this gauntlet.
Oh, yeah.
It argues that religion, with all the rules, all the rituals, it can sometimes feel like a barrier between us and God.
A barrier.
It's like trapped, yeah.
Mm,
Instead, it points to love, specifically a God's love,
okay.
as the one constant thing, the one thing that truly endures.
So it's like they're saying, forget the rule book. Forget the whole to-do list of being good.
Yeah.
It's all about the connection, the love.
Right.
But they don't sugarcoat it, though, do they?
No, they don't.
The source uses some, well, pretty intense language,
Yeah.
describing life without God as miserable and pitiful,
Yeah,
full of these fleeting pleasures,
Yeah.
and then you're just left empty.
that's right. And while that's strong language, it might make some listeners uncomfortable.
Yeah, I can see that.
I think it's designed to shake us out of complacency,
Oh,
The source is trying to highlight the stark reality. We as humans, we crave something more than just this temporary happiness.
mm.
It's arguing that true, lasting fulfillment can only be found in this relationship with God.
I can see that. It's like they're saying, hey, wake up. There's something incredibly valuable here.
Yeah.
Something can transform your life. Don't miss out by chasing, empty distractions.
Mm-hmm.
So how does this source define that relationship with God? What does it actually look like to experience this all-encompassing love?
Well, they go deep into this whole concept of being a child of God. It's not about meticulously following all these religious practices or even trying to earn God's favor.
Right.
They argue that it's about recognizing, an inherent connection to God,
Okay.
an inner transformation that brings power, joy, victory into our lives.
But what does that actually mean? It sounds a bit abstract.
Yeah.
How do you go from feeling lost and disconnected to feeling like a, quote, child of God?
Well, the source really emphasizes that it's not something we achieve through our own efforts. It's not like that.
Okay.
They point to this verse, John 1:12-13. But as many as received him, to them he gave the right to become children of God.
Mm-hmm.
So it's about accepting God's love, allowing ourselves to be loved, recognizing that connection is already there.
Okay, so it's not about earning it. It's about receiving it.
Right.
It's like you're being offered an incredible gift. You don't have to work for it.
Mm.
You just have to accept it. That's a pretty radical concept, especially when you think about how many religions emphasize, rules and rituals as a path to God.
And that actually brings us to another key point the source makes. Salvation by grace, not by works.
Okay.
They quote Ephesians 2:8, "For it is by grace you have been saved, through faith, and this not from yourselves, it is the gift of God."
So they're saying it's not about checking off boxes on some religious to-do list.
Right.
It's about this fundamental shift in perspective,
Yeah.
recognizing that you're already loved and accepted,
Mm-hmm.
and then letting that shake your life.
Exactly. It's like they're saying the starting point isn't trying to be good enough for God,
Right.
but rather understanding that you're already fully accepted and loved by him. And that's a powerful foundation from which to live your life.
It makes you think, doesn't it? What if the key to a fulfilling life isn't about, striving and achieving,
Yeah.
but about surrendering to this idea of being loved unconditionally? It's a big shift. It's different from a lot of the messages we hear, in society.
Right. We're constantly bombarded with these messages about what we need to do, what we need to achieve to be worthy.
Yeah.
But this source, it challenges that whole framework. It says the worthiness is already there.
Oh.
It's inherent.
It's inherent.
And from that place of inherent worthiness, of being loved unconditionally, we can then start to live our lives differently.
So this source is advocating for this major shift in perspective, moving away from striving for love
Yeah.
and moving toward recognizing that it's already there.
It's a big one.
It's a lot to unpack, and honestly, we're just getting started.
Oh, yeah. This is just the tip of the iceberg.
So we're back and still diving deep into this concept of eternal love. We were talking about living a life that's really transformed by God's love. Now, the source we're looking at doesn't hold back. It comes right out and says that a life without this connection is miserable and pitiful.
Yeah. It's a powerful statement, that's for sure.
It is.
And it might rub some people the wrong way.
I can see that.
But I think what they're trying to get across is that, like, we're wired for something deeper than just fleeting pleasures, you know? We crave this sense of belonging, this purpose, something that really satisfies us deep down.
Souls, yeah.
And the source says that longing can only be fulfilled through a connection with God.
So it's not about, like, condemning those who haven't found that connection.
Right.
It's more about highlighting the difference it makes when you do.
Exactly. It's about pointing to a different way of living, a life where, you know, our joy and fulfillment, they aren't dependent on external circumstances or achievements.
Okay.
It's about tapping into a source of strength and peace that comes from knowing you are loved, like fully loved and accepted no matter what.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But how do we go from theory to practice?
Yeah.
Like, what does a life anchored in God's love actually look like? The source mentions prayer, studying scripture, seeking God's presence.
Right.
But how do they translate into actual tangible changes?
That's where it gets interesting.
Yeah?
The source doesn't get bogged down in specific rituals or practices.
Okay.
You see, it's not about performing a set of actions to earn God's favor.
It's not like a checklist.
No. Instead, it's about cultivating, like, a heart posture, a way of being that flows from understanding and embracing God's love for us.
So it's less about the external actions and more about an internal transformation.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that we're already loved and accepted, regardless of our actions.
No matter what we do.
It's about letting that truth sink in deep into our hearts and letting it change the way we see, well, everything, really, ourselves, the world, our place in it.
I can see how that would be freeing, you know?
Yeah.
But doesn't that bring up some questions?
Sure.
If our actions don't affect God's love for us, does that mean we can just do whatever we want?
Yeah.
Where's the accountability?
That's a question that's been debated for, like, centuries.
Really?
Oh, yeah. The source suggests that true freedom, it isn't about doing whatever we please.
Okay.
But it's about aligning ourselves with God's love. It's about understanding that, you know, when we truly grasp how deep his love is for us, it naturally leads us to actions that reflect that love.
So it's not about, like, following rules out of fear or obligation.
No.
It's about living a life that just flows naturally from love and gratitude.
Exactly. The source argues that when we experience the transformative power of God's love, it changes us, our desires, our motivations. We're no longer driven by the need to, like, prove ourselves or earn love because we already have it.
You already have it, yeah.
And from that place, that security, that belonging, our actions become an expression of that love, not a means to attain it.
That makes a lot of sense. It's about being changed from the inside out.
Yeah.
Not trying to change our behavior from the outside in. But this brings us back to something we talked about before.
Okay.
God's plan for our lives.
Right. The source reminds us that God has plans for us, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future, as it says in Jeremiah 29:11.
Powerful words.
Yeah. But as we touched on before, this whole God's plan thing can be interpreted in many ways.
Right.
Some people see it as a predetermined path.
Okay.
Others see it as more of a guiding principle.
I can see how that ambiguity could be frustrating for some people. Like, they might want a clear roadmap. You know, specific instructions on how to live their lives according to God's will.
Yeah, but this source seems to be saying that maybe it's not about having all the answers, but about trusting the process.
Trusting the process. Yeah, that's a great observation. What's interesting is, like, the source doesn't try to define or even limit how God's plan unfolds.
Right.
It just emphasizes that God's love is behind it all. Whether we see the plan clearly or not, whether it goes exactly as we imagined or takes these crazy turns,
Yeah.
God's love is the constant, the guiding force.
It's a pretty reassuring thought.
It is.
Takes the pressure off needing to figure everything out on our own.
Yeah.
Invites us to trust that even when things are tough, even when we don't understand, we're still being guided, still being loved.
And that's where the idea of surrender comes in.
Yeah. It's about letting go of the need to control everything. Embracing the possibility that God's plan for us might be way more grand, way more fulfilling than anything we could come up with ourselves.
It's almost like taking a leap of faith, trusting that even if you can't see the net, you'll be caught.
That's a great analogy.
Thanks.
It takes trust, a willingness to step outside our comfort zones, embrace the unknown,
Right.
But the Source says when we do that, we open ourselves up to experiencing the fullness of God's love
Wow.
and all the amazing things that come with it.
We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. We've been talking about, the difference between those temporary pleasures and real lasting fulfillment, the transformative power of God's love, the challenge of surrendering to his plan, and the freedom that comes from just trusting in his guidance.
And now it's time to bring it all home.
Welcome back. So we've been exploring this idea of God's love as like the ultimate thing,
Yeah.
this force that lasts and can transform not just our relationship with God, but our whole view of life.
Right.
But let's get, a little more personal here.
Okay. Yeah.
How can we take these big ideas
This
and actually apply them to, our own lives?
It starts with, I think, noticing the things we're chasing that maybe aren't really fulfilling us. Remember how the Source talked about like those fleeting pleasures, versus that lasting fulfillment you get from a relationship with God?
Yeah.
Think about it in your own life. What are you pursuing that leaves you feeling kind of empty or dissatisfied afterward?
It's so easy to get caught up in the hustle, always striving for more, a bigger house, a nicer car, more recognition at work.
It's a never-ending cycle.
It really is.
Like, we're programmed to think that happiness is out there somewhere in these milestones or possessions.
Yeah.
But the Source wants us to look inside, ask ourselves, are these things, are they really what my soul wants? Are they bringing me closer to God, closer to that lasting fulfillment?
That's a big question, isn't it?
It is.
It's like holding up a mirror. What am I really after here?
Right.
It makes you get honest about whether the things you're chasing are actually bringing you closer to, well, what really matters.
And it's not about judging ourselves. We're all human.
Of course.
It's more about becoming aware, recognizing how these desires can distract us from a deeper truth. The Source seems to say that maybe true fulfillment isn't about getting more,
Okay.
but about surrendering to something bigger.
This brings us back to God's plan,
Yeah.
right? The thing we were discussing.
Exactly. We get so caught up in controlling our own destiny, planning out every little step. We forget there might be a bigger purpose at work.
That can be scary for some people.
Absolutely. It's like letting go of the wheel, trusting you'll end up where you're supposed to be, even if the path is unclear or full of detours.
But the Source says, that's where we find freedom. Real, lasting joy. It's like saying, okay, I don't have all the answers. I don't know how this is going to go, but I trust there's something guiding me.
Something loving, and I'm open to seeing where it leads.
Exactly.
That openness, that willingness to embrace the unknown, it's powerful stuff.
It is.
Frees you from having to figure everything out yourself.
Yeah.
Lets you experience life with, wonder and possibility.
Even the hard parts, the things that seem like setbacks, those can be opportunities.
Oh, absolutely.
For growth, for transformation.
It's shifting your mindset from fear, from scarcity to abundance and trust.
It's not always easy, but it feels so much better than trying to control everything.
And the beautiful thing is this idea of surrender, it's not just for religious folks.
Right.
Even if you don't believe in a personal God, this concept of letting go, trusting in something bigger, it can still be powerful.
It's a universal thing, isn't it? To want something more, something beyond the everyday. And this deep dive, it's made us wonder if that something more is the love that connects us all.
Yeah.
The love that's always been there.
Just waiting for us to see it, embrace it.
And when you do, it can change everything. Your relationships, your work, your purpose. It can bring peace, meaning even when things are chaotic.
It can.
So that's our deep dive. We've gone deep, right? Talked about big ideas, challenging stuff. Hopefully spark some new thoughts.
I think so.
But it doesn't end here.
No, this is just the beginning. Keep exploring these ideas. Keep asking questions. Stay curious. What really resonated with you? What challenged your beliefs? What new perspectives did you find?
Let those questions simmer. See where they take you.
Yeah.
This is your invitation to keep diving deep. Embrace the journey, trust the process, and most importantly, stay open to the power of love.
Beautiful.
Thanks for joining us, and until next time, keep diving.